Hello, what's up everyone? Today we'll be covering the Mindthief solo scenario. Before we go any further, as always, spoiler alert, if you do not wish to be spoiled about the Mindthief solo scenario or cards up to level 7, please keep your eyes shut and bookmark this video, come back at another time when you're ready to view this video. Alright, with that warning out of the way, let's get started. The theme and challenge of this scenario is pretty simple. After my Mindthief has completed her journey through the campaign and completed a personal quest, she decides to retire, but not before finishing one last piece of unfinished business, a solo scenario. Now, I wasn't very keen on the scenario when I saw that it involved vermling genocide. Like, come on, this is not realistic. Are you telling me in the real world, do humans murder other humans? Well, yeah, I guess. But still, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. There are pros and cons to, fighting other vermlings. We'll get to that when we talk about the scenario. But the challenges that we face right now are as follows. Because I'm using my Mindthief at the state of its retirement, I will not be able to customize my Mindthief's build according to the solo scenario. I have to use what I've built in the past scenarios as I leveled up my Mindthief and watched it grow to become even stronger. But yeah, that means I'm not allowed to buy items that might be situationally better in that scenario. I also do not have access to prosperity level 3 items. That's because my main party has not really found that many prosperity gaining cards or scenarios yet. As a result, I'll be playing with cards up to only prosperity 2, so this should be a lot harder. Right? So this is the state of my Mindthief at its retirement, and this is what I'll be using for this scenario. On the left, you'll see the items that I have bought. It's actually a very small collection of items, right? This Mindthief is rather item lean. All we have are 3 potions, 3 pretty good potions. The mana potion I found really useful as I grabbed Dark Frenzy as my level 6 card before corrupting Embrace. Minor healing and stamina potions just really powerful in general. Cloak of Invisibility is a no-brainer on Mindthief, and Battle Axe, very useful for increasing my burst damage output as the Mindthief. Right, so that's all the items I have because most of the other gold that I earn in my playthroughs have been spent donating to the temple. Speaking of which, I'm not allowed to donate to the temple for the Mindthief solo scenario either. On the right, you'll see the ability cards that I have chosen for each level. Not much to explain here except that at level 6 I decided to go with Dark Frenzy, and then at level 7 where my Mindthief retired, I picked up the other level 6 card, Corrupting Embrace, instead of going for a level 7 card. As you know, I love the melee damage build of Mindthief, so picking up both level 6 cards was a no-brainer here. On the top, you'll also notice that I've performed one enhancement. I spent 50 gold to put the Strengthen on Empathetic Assault's bottom, so it not only moves and heals me, it also strengthens myself. And I found that to be a very useful investment. Right, so this is the character we'll be using, and this is the attack modifier deck we are using. We are going to use the perks as I have accumulated throughout my campaign. That's 6 perks from leveling up, and an additional 2 more for getting check marks across the various campaigns. You'll notice that I basically spent all my check marks picking up perks that have nothing to do with rolling modifiers. I'm absolutely avoiding all those rolling modifiers because I find that my Mindthief build, with my Mindthief build, I'm able to, perform strengthened attacks more often than not. And obviously, rolling modifiers not only dilute the power of strengthen, but more importantly, it also increases the chance of you missing on a strengthened attack. With my current attack modifier deck, you can never miss on a strengthened attack, and this consistency and reliability is especially useful in a solo scenario where every hit has to count, otherwise nasty things will happen. Right, so very lean and mean deck. You'll see a lot of +2s. This is a very powerful deck, and this is really good for the Mindthief because as you notice, the Mindthief has a lot of low value attacks, right? The Mindthief typically relies on its augments to amplify its attacks, but if the attacks are ranged or if the Mind's weakness is not in play, then you're doing very measly 1 or 2 damage numbers, and in those scenarios, +2 is better, or rather equal or even better than a ×2. So having lots of +2s in my deck is a real boon, and you'll see that come into play during the playthrough. Now this is the Mindthief solo scenario. Don't be fooled by the way it looks. Even though there are 3 rooms, there are actually 4 parts to this scenario, and we'll walk you through each part individually. We start off in the first room. This is the swarm room, I call it colloquially, because right off the bat, you're swarmed by 6 other Vermling Scouts. So these Vermling Scouts are fragile but numerous, and this, right off the bat, it attacks one weakness of the Mindthief, and that is the Mindthief doesn't really have access to AoE attacks. Unlike, say, the Spellweaver or Cragheart, the Mindthief just doesn't excel at hitting multiple targets at once. The best thing you've got is definitely Mass Hysteria. Target 4 is very much welcome, but you have to contend with the low attack value. Attack 1 probably won't kill. We'll talk more about that later. The next best thing you have is Corrupting Embrace. This is secretly a really good card for this room because it performs 2 different attack 1s, both of which are boosted by your augment. This means that you can potentially hit 2 Vermlings in 1 attack action, possibly killing 2 birds with 1 stone, really. And finally, you have the Battle Axe. This is almost certainly the room which I'm going to use my Battle Axe. I don't see any better way to use it. As long as it's a melee attack, I can hit 2 scouts with it, and hopefully this will dwindle down the numbers and, allow me to not get swarmed by them. Right, because I'm very worried about getting swarmed, right? There's no way I'm going to be able to dispatch lots of these scouts on the first turn. I will need some form of damage mitigation. And as you know, the Vermling Mindthief doesn't have much in the way of heals, so instead I'm going to use Invisibility. This is where Into the Night comes in. Right, I know I have an Invisibility Cloak, but what better way to double up on the Invisibility than to play Into the Night? Invisibility is very important for the Mindthief because if you've ever played the Mindthief before, you'll know that the first room is always the hardest room because the Mindthief has a slow start compared to all the other characters because it needs to set up its augment. So you basically have 1 turn's worth of downtime where you're playing your augment, and this leaves you very vulnerable, and we can't have that in this scenario. There's no one else to cover us. So we need to play some form of cover of darkness, and Into the Night does exactly that. It keeps us safe for a few turns while we set up our augment. I think I mentioned in a previous playthrough where I was soloing the Mindthief in another scenario that invisibility is kind of a broken mechanic in single player, and it applies here as well. Being invisible means that you mitigate 6 Vermling Scouts worth of damage every turn you're invisible, and that's a huge deal. We are going to abuse that. Alright? We note that the Vermling Scouts are 1 level lower than the scenario level. So what this means is that the Scouts are very squishy, and they don't do a lot of damage. This means that, this room probably was designed with the intention of you using an augment other than the Mind's Weakness, something like the augment that gives you Shield, Feedback Loop, or Retaliate, Vicious Blood. We are not going to use either of those here because I think those come into effect too slowly, and I don't have access to Vicious Blood anyway. So instead, we are just going to go all out offensive and try to kill these Vermling Scouts with our massive damage before they can do much damage to us. We are using Invisibility to mitigate said damage. Now, one additional difficulty posed by the fact that we are at level 7 is the fact that the Vermling Scouts are now stronger. Most players play the solo scenario at level 5 or 6. This means that the scenario difficulty is 3, and because of the special rule, lowering the Scouts level by 1, the Vermling Scouts would only have 3 health. Now at 3 health, these Scouts are incredibly squishy. A single Mass Hysteria can easily kill a bunch of them, especially with a good modifier deck with lots of +2s with advantage. So if I were level 5 or 6, it's very easy. All I'll do is play Strengthen as my first bottom action and Mass Hysteria as my first top action. I'll be able to wipe the board clean of Vermling Scouts even before they get to act. Now I can't do this at my level, because at level 7, at scenario level 4, the Vermling Scouts are level 3. So they have 5 HP, and 5 health is significantly more than 3. No longer can be killed by a single mass hysteria. This is why the invisibility is so important. I'll probably need multiple hits to dispatch these scouts. So multiple turns of invisibility from Into the Night, and my invisibility cloak are probably necessary here. Alright? So that's just the first room. Already we have so much to think about, and it's just the first room. Wait till we see the rest of the rooms, because those are just out of whack. Right? Our second room is something really unique. Right? Here we see a very, a room that I've never really seen before in the campaign. This room has no enemies at all, however. It's a very deadly room. Right? As soon as you open door number 1 from the first room to the second room, you immediately suffer 5 damage and gain poison. Then after the end of each turn, you will regain that poison. Now you might think, okay, since you're poisoned, why not just stay poisoned? Well, if you're poisoned and you attempt to take more poison as a special scenario effect, you'll suffer 3 damage. And as you know, the Mindthief is not the tankiest hero, so the Mindthief is going to go down very quickly unless you can mitigate that poison by healing every single turn. So looking at the heal cards available to me, we have a couple, right? For ability cards, all we have is Empathetic Assault's Bottom, that is reusable. But for items, we have the Minor Healing Potion and the Stamina Potion, which can both help. The Stamina Potion, of course, recovering the Empathetic Assault so that we can play it twice in the same pass. Now that is okay, and I tried, with three sources of healing, single use more or less, right? You can't get Empathetic Assault back unless you rest, and resting takes time. This means that if I can clear this particular room in 3 turns, I wouldn't need to, I would have settled this room. So all I need to do is to clear this room in 3 turns. And to do that, I need to bash each altar. So there are 3 altars in the room marked as the letter A, and I need to, these are obstacles with hit point values, and I need to reduce all the hit point values to 0. They start with 10 HP because it's scenario level 7. So the question is, can I deal 3 instances of 10 damage in 3 turns? Because 3 turns is what it takes for my healing to run out. And the answer is a very resounding nope. Yeah, even my strongest attack, say my Dark Frenzy, that would do 8 damage with the Mind's Weakness. Corrupting Embrace does 6 damage with the Mind's Weakness. That's not enough. Bear in mind that the altars are immune to status effects, so I can't poison the altars, I can't wound the altars. They are just too tanky to dispatch quickly. So we don't really have a choice here. We cannot use the rush strategy. We have to go slow and do it the way that the designer intended it to, which is to swap out your augment and use the healing augments instead. That's Parasitic Influence, which allows you to heal 2 on every single melee attack. And what this does is, as long as you perform a melee attack every turn, you will remove the poison that you gain at the end of the last round, effectively treading water this way. So this is not ideal at all. By playing Parasitic Influence, it means that we are not playing the Mind's Weakness, which means that our damage output becomes absolutely terrible, right? This means that we'll take a very long time to clear this room, and we won't have enough stamina to breach the final room. But we don't really have a choice here. As I said, the mass damage method just doesn't work against these tanky altars. So we have to use Parasitic Influence here, and we have to rely on identifying which of our ability cards do the most damage. Now, the one thing, our one saving grace here is that we have a really good attack modifier deck. You remember that it's chock full of +1s and +2s, so anything that allows you to perform multiple attacks is very good in my book. The more often you can draw from your attack modifier deck, the more damage you deal. In fact, I think my attack modifier deck might just end up doing more damage than the base attack values of my cards themselves. So with that said, cards that allow you to multi-attack, once again, the best candidate by far is Mass Hysteria, allowing me to get 3 attacks off, 1 on each altar. This allows me to draw 3 times from my modifier deck, or 6 times if I'm strengthened. The next one is Dark Frenzy. Dark Frenzy is powerful. Well, it has a very powerful top, but it's the bottom I'm looking at. Bottom attack actions are particularly valuable in this room because it means that you can perform multiple attacks in the same turn. Instead of just one top attack, you get 2 attacks, one on top and one on the bottom as well if I use Dark Frenzy's bottom. Same thing with Brain Leech. An attack 1 on the bottom not only triggers Parasitic Influence for the heal, it also strengthens myself to increase my damage output with my subsequent attack. So these are all very key cards that I'll be relying on to ensure that the altars are dispatched as quickly as possible. Now, there's no penalty for me taking my own sweet time in this room. After all, I'm able to tread water with Parasitic Influence as long as I make a melee attack every turn. The real issue is having enough stamina for the final room. This is where we meet more Vermling foes. This time we are up against some Shamans in addition to the Elite Scout. So this is just basically your standard combat, except that there are a couple of damage traps lying around that deal 6 damage at this scenario level. So looking at the numbers, it seems obvious what this room is trying to do. It wants you to use your one and only one push ability in Fearsome Blade in order to get those enemies onto the trap, springing those traps and effectively just wiping them out from the game. This works especially well against the Shamans because they are very squishy, but they have shield, very, very sizable amount of shield that the traps simply bypass. Traps ignore shield. So if we don't have Fearsome Blade, we are forced to do things the hard way. We need to deal raw damage to these foes, and we need to be able to deal large chunks of damage. To do this, well, we are going to be carried by our level 6 cards. These melee attack cards just do so much work. Corrupting Embrace, poisoning enemies, allowing us to mitigate some of that shield. And then Dark Frenzy with a potential 8 damage, including the Mind's Weakness, allows us to dispatch the Elite Vermling Scout in 1 hit. So yeah, that's the pros and cons of fighting against Vermlings. While it's racial genocide, at least these are some of the easiest monsters in the game to deal with. Honestly, the fact that you can one-shot KO an elite monster is pretty good, I must say. So yeah, there's definitely that potential. And with only 3 enemies, this shouldn't be too difficult. The real issue is having enough stamina once more for the final leg of the scenario. After all the Vermlings are killed, some bad things are going to happen. Now, with the way this scenario is written, if you read the special rules, when all Vermlings are dead, read number 3. Technically, this will never happen. Unless you kill yourself. Because you, the Mindthief, are technically a Vermling as well. And we are not going to kill our Vermling Mindthief. That's not going to happen. So we'll just have to read it as though it means when all enemy Vermlings are dead. This Mindthief Vermling is not going to succumb to its wounds. It's going to stay strong and fight against the spawned Elite Earth Demon. So once all the enemy Vermlings are dead, an Elite Earth Demon will spawn right in the middle of the room. The problem is this Elite final boss, I'll call it from now on as a final boss, has double a regular Elite Demon's hit points. So that's 42 hit points we need to whittle down. This is effectively a huge punching bag. Very tanky. Thankfully no shield, but very, very meaty. So this is just a test of how much DPS we can deal to this punching bag of an Earth Demon. Right? So damage isn't really a big problem for us as long as we still have our level 6 melee attack cards and our Mind's Weakness. Those are very powerful cards. The real issue is dealing with the Earth Demon's attacks, because the Earth Demon immobilizes on attack. So if it draws a ranged attack card into, right, it will move away from us in order to avoid disadvantage and then shoot us from afar, immobilizing us at a distance. And that is very terrible news. If you've ever played the Mindthief before, you know that getting immobilized or disarmed is the worst possible scenario that can happen. And who knows, the Earth Demon might be able to do that. Its ability card, its character card, or rather its monster card specifically says that it immobilizes on every attack. So that's very dangerous potential. To avoid this, we need to stun lock the boss, and fortunately the Mindthief has absolutely no difficulty with that. Thankfully, because there's one and only one enemy in this part of the scenario, the final stretch, we can safely say that the Perverse Edge into Frigid Apparition combo will help us take care of the boss by stun locking it. For those of you unfamiliar with the combo, you simply play Perverse Edge as your first action, stunning the boss with your bottom action. On the second turn, you follow it up with Frigid Apparition because you've already generated Cold or the Ice element with Perverse Edge. You are able to use Frigid Apparition's top attack action to stun the Earth Demon again. So this stuns the Earth Demon for 2 whole rounds, but you can double the length of the stun into 4 rounds by simply recovering these 2 cards using a minor stamina potion. So basically you play Perverse Edge twice and Frigid Apparition twice. The Earth Demon is stunned for 4 turns, which should be more than enough to remove most of its hit points. So this is what we are going to strive for in this part 4 of the scenario. And to help us out with DPS, we are going to use Corrupting Embrace early on to apply poison to the Earth Demon. The poison will linger around for the rest of the scenario, so every single one of our attacks against the Earth Demon will be amplified very nicely. Right, so this should be fairly smooth sailing as long as we move before the Earth Demon, which we almost certainly will with our amazing initiative. This is what makes the Mindthief so strong, the ability to neuter a single enemy using the stun lock combo and going very early on in the turn. So yep, that is the scenario in a nutshell. Now let's build our ability deck, having seen what's up in store for us. Right, so starting from the top left and working our way to the right, we have the Mind's Weakness. This is the first and most important card in any Mindthief's arsenal. There's no way I'm going to pass up on adding 2 attack to every one of my melee attacks. Working backwards from part 4 of the scenario, we want the Perverse Edge Frigid Apparition combo as mentioned. In part 3 of the scenario, we said that we wanted good DPS, so Corrupting Embrace and Dark Frenzies are auto-includes. Then working back to part 2 of the scenario, where we have to defeat the altars and get regularly poisoned, Parasitic Influence as an augment is necessary. This is a card that I've never played after my first scenario with the Mindthief. It's just not worth playing, except in this one very niche solo scenario where it's absolutely necessary to stay alive. Also, I mentioned that we needed Mass Hysteria for multi-target attacks. We needed in both parts 1 and 2, so we're going to play that. Then with our last 3 card slots, Into the Night, as we mentioned, requiring invisibility in our very first room to set up our augment, and then Empathetic Assault and Brain Leech, our 2 strengthened cards. These are cards that we must play because it will offer us damage consistency throughout the rest of the game, ensuring that whenever we draw the null, we are not doing 0 damage. So these are very important cards, and you'll notice that just like that, we've already filled out our entire 10 hand size. You'll notice that there are a lot of all-stars missing. We did not bring our level 2 card, we did not bring our level 4 card, Cranium Overload, surprisingly. But I think the biggest, most glaring omission is none other than Fearsome Blade, our push ability. We already mentioned that in part 3, we needed the push ability to push the Shamans and the Elite Vermling Scout into the damage trap. Well, unfortunately, I just could not find a card slot to replace for Fearsome Blade. There's nothing that is less important amongst these 10 cards. So we'll just have to make do without Fearsome Blade, which is not a big problem because we can make up for that simply by dealing insane amounts of damage with the Mind's Weakness coupled with our level 6 cards. As you notice, the level 6 cards are able to one-shot the Elite Vermling, so we shouldn't have too much trouble dealing with those Vermlings without relying on the traps that are scattered in the room. Right, so that's all for the theory crafting. I know it's been a whole mouthful listening to me theory craft about this nonsense. Well, we'll head into the fun part of the game. We'll head on to the Tabletop Simulator and simulate some Vermling monsters. Join me then. I'll see you in the next video.